Welcome everyone. Today we're obviously going to be running through Sovelia Routing, and I'm just going to be giving you a bit of an introduction to Sovelia Routing. So what the product is, where it sits, and how you might get up and running with the tool as a kind of whole. So we'll have a little bit of look around the kind of the configuration, and we'll also have a look at kind of just a general overview of the product so that you're aware of what it is and kind of maybe where it may benefit you. So if you haven't spoken to me before, my name is Jason Kelly and I'm an application specialist here at Symetri. And I've been in this industry now for about 5 years and working with Symetri for about five years. And my key focuses are in and around the Inventor Professional software, as well as kind of some of the add-ins that come with that. So some of the Sovelia products that run alongside it, including routing and the toolkit for Inventor. And also from a data management side, I look at it as well from the Vault side. So we'll touch a tiny little bit on today about on the Vault side in terms of naming conventions and things like that. But we won't dive too deep into the data management because this is purely around kind of the Sovelia routing product and how it works and kind of the features of it. So just a little bit of an agenda then, and we're going to be breaking it down into 4 kind of key sections. So I'll obviously start off by giving you a little bit of an introduction to the software. So a bit of the background of Sovelia Routing, so kind of why it was developed. We'll have a look at kind of some of the functionality requirements that you guys as customers or users of the product day in, day out, why you needed the product and why there was kind of a gap in the market for it. Okay, and why the product is a little bit of a differentiator from kind of other software. Okay, we'll then move into the training and installation side. So in terms of, we'll look a little bit kind of around the commercials of the product. So what we can help offer you, and in terms of kind of training, and also where you can download the product from, and then maybe a little bit on licensing as well. Okay, so we'll start to discuss about how you can get licenses and speak to us about that. We'll obviously then deep dive into the product, so we'll have a look in Inventor itself and in the routing environment, and we'll then have a look at also about the configuration steps, because kind of what we want to take away from this webinar is the fact that obviously you've got an understanding of what the product is, but also how that if you get the product, you want to be able to take that product and kind of get running with it straight away. So we'll also have a little bit of a look at kind of the configuration side. And then hopefully we should have a bit of time at the end for questions. So the way this is going to work is obviously if you've got any questions, I'll give the webinar to start with, and then I'll take any questions at the end. So there should be a chat window. There's also a question window as well. So if you want to pop any questions that you think of, or that you maybe pops into your head as we're going through, pop them in the chat window or in the question box, and I'll come back to them at the end. We've also got one of my colleagues, I don't know if he's here yet, he might be joining a bit later on, Azem Bunjaku. He's over from our Swedish team, and he's the product owner for Sovelia Routing. So he'll be here at the end, hopefully, to help answer any questions as well. Okay. So let's start off then, and let's have a little bit of a look around the background of the product. So the product has been developed by our in-house team here at Symetri, and it's been evolving for a number of years now. Okay, so product development started back in 2017, and the first release was put out in 2018. So in terms of kind of numbers of the product, we've got kind of high number of users now, mainly over in the Nordics, in Denmark and Sweden, as this is where the product was developed, and it's now branched out further into Europe. With some of our customers now even sitting in South Africa and Canada as well. So as with kind of most in-house development tools, the product was designed based off one customer or multiple customer requests. So obviously you guys are using the products day in, day out. You're experiencing kind of the pain points with some of the other routing products that come around. So with this kind of opportunity, we saw kind of a gap in the market. And this leads us nicely into our kind of specification. So this is the kind of the key points that for tools like the tube and pipe environment or other tools that are around there, they're quite complex tools. They're quite hard to set up. It takes quite a while. It's quite clunky, and it isn't a very user-friendly environment. So this is where that kind of core specification for the product came about. So obviously we want to set up a quick, when you take the product, you want to be able to take your routes and jump in and quickly set up and start to create your routes and runs. And you want to be able to use it in a kind of a user-friendly or user-friendly experience within there. So obviously the main rival for the product is the tube and pipe environment. I don't particularly like the word rival because they work, obviously the core of the product is very similar. Okay, so it's going to be you're going to be able to create your routes and runs and add your fixtures and fittings within there, but they work in very different workflows. Okay, and that's kind of the whole point. And we want to look at kind of having an easier to use tool within there. Again, very different workflows and very different outcomes. And you'll see as I'm going through kind of the demo and the presentation, the kind of the different outcomes and the different solutions that Sovelia Routing is going to offer in comparison to maybe the tube and pipe environment or other similar products. So in terms of support, I just thought I'd mention that obviously Sovelia Routing has been around since the kind of the 2018 release. But in terms of activating the product, it worked for the current release, which is obviously Inventor 2023, and the 3 prior releases. So that's where we kind of run the support to, and that's in line with the Autodesk scheme as well. So just something to be aware of. Obviously, we've got 24 coming out in a few months' time as well. So we'll bump that release package up. So any questions as well, just speak to us and we can look into that. So I guess probably the main question that you're asking is why should I or we as a company use the product rather than use the built-in tube and pipe environment? And I think the main thing comes out of kind of the Sovelia range of products. So obviously we don't only have Sovelia Routing, okay, we've got a whole range of Sovelia products. And one of the key drivers for the Sovelia products is automation and automating tasks to reduce kind of repetition for your kind of engineers or designers, because at the end of the day, they want to be spending more of their time engineering and actually designing the products rather than the more manual tasks that you're running kind of over and over again. And this is also going to improve kind of your consistency by automating a lot of tasks, reducing that kind of human error, and improving the compliance of output. Okay, so if you're, as we talked through, there's some kind of automation in Sovelia Routing with things like drawing creation, pipe route and run creation, and bending machine outputs. If you're outputting them all as the business in the same way, then it's going to make yourselves more compliant and you're running off your kind of core standards. So let's kind of dive a little bit deeper then into kind of the core of Sovelia Routing. So obviously at its core, it does, or the kind of the routing environment is there. So what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to create and modify your routes, as well as place kind of fixtures and fittings within there. Okay, so things like bends, tees, reducers, any kind of connection fittings, you're all going to be able to do that within the Sovelia Routing environment, and it's going to be a lot easier and in a lot more kind of user-friendly way. Again, I've spoken briefly about the kind of the bending rules within there. So we want to set up bending machines so that you can have configurations of different bending machines within there. So again, it's a nice click, easy output type for that particular machine that you're setting up. Now, one thing I'm just going to touch on is the pipe installation. Okay, so this is again a differentiator from the tube and pipe environment and other products. So with your pipe installation, you've already got the geometry there. So the Sovelia Routing environment has a button that's going to allow you to create your installation. Okay, so it's a nice, quick, easy button, and that's all going to be configured from your standard. Okay, so once you've configured your standard, you can put in insulation thicknesses and have kind of a library of insulation types that is just going to be kind of a one-click button, and that can be kind of exported out globally throughout the team as well. And as I mentioned, that compliance is something that's key with a lot of the Sovelia products, okay, not only Sovelia routing, but around the rest of the range. So kind of data export and controlling and driving standards is quite key. So that's all been included in the core of the kind of the Sovelia routing functions, or the Sovelia routing product. Okay, so getting started then. So we've obviously had a little bit of a look at kind of the background and how it sits and how it works. But in terms of installation, when you install the product at its core, you'll have a kind of a configuration set up already for you. Obviously, this configuration setup is going to be things like your pipes and your bends and your fixtures and fittings. Now, that isn't going to be the same for everyone. We obviously understand that. We needed to put in kind of a core configuration for you, but there is ways of kind of customizing it, and we'll show the in quite a lot of detail today about the spec editor and how that kind of function works and how you can actually set up the configuration of the environment. But in terms of installation, then you can download it from the Sovelia.com website. Obviously, we're not going to go into too much detail on licensing side today, but you will require a license to access the product. So if you do want to have a license or speak to someone, obviously speak to us. We'll be able to help you with your installation. We can also help you with your configuration, okay? Because obviously we want that kind of initial plug and play access. So you can take the product, you don't have to spend hours and hours kind of configuring everything in there. That's why we've put that initial customization in, and then that you can take the product and actually just kind of get going and get creating your routes. But if there is extra customization that you need, obviously that's very understandable. We can help you and support with that. We also offer training as well. Again, the tool was designed to be very user friendly and used in a lot of kind of quick and easy dialog boxes that are just kind of one click functions. But obviously, with every new bit of software, you are going to require some training. We do offer kind of short training sessions just to kind of get you up and running with the software, similar to kind of what we're doing now with a bit of a virtual session, which can be done in kind of short increments, in half-day sessions and things like that. Or we can do a deeper dive into the training and a deeper dive into the product, which can be again for kind of larger groups of users as well. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to have a little bit of a look at the product, and I'm going to jump into Inventor just to give you a bit of an example to start with, and then we'll take a look at kind of some of our spec and some of our settings to have a look at how we can configure our workflow. But obviously the first thing to show you is just how you're going to be creating and editing your routes, how you're going to be placing in your tees and your reducers and your fixtures and fittings, things like insulation, and then some of the other kind of productivity tools that come with, again, a lot of the Sovelia range. Okay, so let's have a jump into Inventor then. So what I've got here is just a setup. Okay, again, this is just a standard file that we've got. Again, if you're looking for any kind of test files or anything like that, feel free to ask us and we can provide some data sets for you. And you can see we've already got some routes and runs that are set up within here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how that you can create a new route and kind of how it functions and flows within the kind of the Sovelia routing environment. And you'll notice at the top, we've obviously got now our Sovelia routing ribbon, okay? And with everything kind of Autodesk, it's all been aligned with that kind of similar workflow. You're working left to right or top to bottom with some of your more kind of automation tasks once the kind of the core of the product or the core of the model has been created. So the first thing we're going to do then is create just a new blank route to start with. So I'm going to choose new route, and we're going to start it from this point here. So I'm going to choose or select on where I want to start my route. Now you can see at the top we have our create pipe dialog box pop up, and again working top to bottom. At the top we've got some of our naming schemes. Okay, so at the minute we're just going to be calling it pipe and then the next sequential number. We can then choose the spec. Okay, and I'll touch on the spec in a lot more detail But you can see I'm going to choose just the basic spec that we've put in there, or the core spec that we've put in there. But you can see you can put in different standards. You can also put in, maybe you've got different departments that are purchasing in from different suppliers. Okay, so you could have different spec for a different supplier. And you could also choose, maybe you've got or you're working with different customers. Okay, you could have a different spec per customer, so that you're setting up your specs and linking it to that specific customer. And what the spec's going to do is it's going to link all of our pieces together. So obviously what we're doing at the minute is just creating a bit of pipe, but that pipe has obviously got a size to it. Okay, and I'm going to drop this down and I'm going to change that size to be a 2-inch pipe. Okay, but what the spec's going to do is it's going to allow us then to configure any fixtures and fittings that are going to sync with that particular size of pipe, or that particular instance of pipe. Okay, so this size that's within here. So the first thing that the spec is going to pick up is the connection. So if I drop this connection down, okay, I can see I've got 2 connection points of my start connection. Okay, and if I choose that, it's going to add that into my model. Okay, so that model, or that starting connection, has now been picked up, it's been added. Okay, and I've got another dialog box that's appearing. Okay, so this dialog box is going to be changing the length of that piece of pipe. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to put in a 350mm length. Okay, and you can see it's added in the start connection and the pipe so far. Because we wanted to make it nice and user friendly, to add connections in is nice and easy. So to add a bend is just simply you're choosing to add a bend in here. And again, you've got then the option designed or pulling from the spec of which bend you want to put in from this little drop down. Okay, so you've got a 90-degree bend or you've got a 45-degree bend. For the purposes, I'm going to leave it at 90 degrees. Okay, and I'm just going to change the angle within here. Okay, so it's nice and easy. All I'm doing so far is adding in a length and then adding in a bend and then changing the angle of it. What we can then do is choose to add in a straight. Okay, so that's going to be another piece of pipe. And this time, rather than putting in another bit of another length, I'm going to select on some geometry that's already existing. Now this geometry can be a circular reference, it can be a plane, or it can be a face. So you can see in here, I've already got a plane set up. Okay, so I'm just going to snap it to that plane. And you'll see it gives the dimension value or the pipe information length in both dialog boxes. So what we can then do is start to then move on from that. If I then choose to add a bend, okay, I can see that that bend is putting it in correct, at the correct angle, sorry. And again, I've got the options to change it to a 45-degree or a 90-degree bend. But what you'll notice again is that because I've snapped it to this particular plane, it's dropped the length and put the center line through where the bend is coming to. And again, that is configurable as an option. At this point, I'm just going to choose to add a straight, and you can see you get the gist of kind of where we're going with this. It's nice and easy to kind of add in particular points. There's also kind of a similar function to the auto route function. So what I can do is I want to align up now my pipe to snap so it's in line with this particular route as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on the circular reference that it's highlighting here. And it's going to add in a couple of extra pieces that are unnecessary, that I don't need. But what's quite good about this kind of package is that instead of having to hit OK, go back, delete the pipe and start a new route, which you'd have to do in the tube and pipe environment, you can see as I hover over each of the pieces, okay, it's highlighting them red and it's going to take you back to that point. So you have a lot of kind of configuration and editability with that particular piece. So I'm going to select on this piece and it's going to drop it back in line with that particular component. So what I can now do is choose to add in a bend, okay, to drop it down again by 90 degrees, add in a straight. So again, we're dropping it down and you can see I've got a U-bolt in here, which I want to send my pipe through. Now again, I can use that kind of automation feature within here to snap to that particular face. Okay, so you can see it's going to snap to that point, it's going to drop it down, add in a bend and add in a straight. If I select on that straight, I can actually then go and edit the length of that particular piece, okay, rather than having to delete it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap it to the end point, okay, which is where it's going to be my output. And then all I have to simply do is add in an end connection. So if I drop the connection down, okay, I'm going to add in another flange welding neck, okay, and you can see how quickly and easily I've created quite a complex route going out, up, across, and all I've done is I've put in one plane within there, okay, and I didn't even need that plane. I could reference other values as well. It was just to show it for the purposes of the demo. So if I choose OK on that feature, what it's going to do is it's going to run through and generate the files from the spec. Okay, so you can see it's just generating that route for me now. And just a little bit on the structure. Okay, this is all set up and configured from your settings, but you'll see it's set the pipe 15, which was the name of the file, as well as some of the pipe lengths within here. Okay, and also some of the fixtures and fittings that have been applied as we're going through, so the bends and the end connections and start connections. What we can also do in the new route is go back and edit that if required, and we can also change the style. So if we realize actually this needs to be a 1.5 inch pipe that's running through, we can hit change style and go and change that particular route if needed. But what we're going to have a look at is adding in some of our fixtures and fittings within here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a T along this pipe, this top pipe here. So I'm just going to click on a certain point along the pipe, sorry, and you can see it's going to add that T in. Now, again, there's some extra features in here. We've got the option to add in a collar, an option to add in a hole. Again, all can be defined within the spec editor so that you're putting in your defined or core sizes and things like that. Again, I can choose which T I want based on the size of the pipe that I've selected. Okay, so I could add in a reducing T if I need to. I'm actually going to add in a manual reducer as well, just to show you the example of that. Now, a couple of things that I want to do is I want to line it up with this T on the other side. Again, just a simple click on a circular reference, okay, and that's going to pick up and line our two T junctions up. Okay, so I've snapped it up to the certain plane and I've dropped them two in line. And then I just need to rotate it by 90 degrees and choose OK. And what that will do is it'll obviously split the pipe, so you'll have two separate pipe sections and then you have your T-junction sat within there. I can then kind of nice and easily just create a route between the two. So I'm just going to select on one circular reference and then the other and put them between the two. Now, one thing, as I mentioned, what we've got is a 2-inch pipe and an 1.5 inch pipe. So we're actually going to have to add in a reducer within here or to make it expand to the correct size. Okay, because I'm going to leave that size set at 1.5 inches. So if I choose OK, you can see we've got just a small gap here appearing. So we need to add in the reducer. So I'm just going to select reduce and add that option. I'm then going to choose the expand option to expand to the 2 from the 1.5, okay, and flip the direction. Okay, so you can see the reducer type is being picked from the kind of nice and easily dialog window that's appearing within here. And again, I can change that position. Now the position you can see is picked from this green dot to green dot. You can change that by selecting on some of these yellow dots as well. Okay, so I'm just going to drop that in 100 mil within there. So it gives us, as I say, a lot easier workflow than something that's like within the kind of the tube and pipe environment that makes it a little bit clunky and a little bit slower to create something of this kind of complexity. One thing I am going to show you is just the installation option. Okay, so again, the installation will need to be configured from within your spec editor. But if I choose that installation button, I can go down to a particular pipe, add in the installation, okay, and then it's going to pick the thickness that's been defined in my spec editor and choose OK on that. Now, it won't look like anything has changed within here, but if I zoom in, you'll see that there's a slight outline on that particular piece. So if I find that pipe 7 that's within here, you can see that it's been the enable checkbox has been turned off. Okay, so it's going to actually appear within our model. Okay, but if I open that file up, okay, you can see it's going to add in a 2mm insulation piece and give it some naming conventions as well. So that will pull through to your bill of materials or your cutting list. Okay, so the whole kind of overview or quick demo that I've given you there just gives you a bit of an understanding of how the product works and kind of the core functionality of setting this up. Just a couple of other things I will quickly show you before we jump back in. Obviously, we've got our productivity area. So we have the option to promote and demote. So if we don't want this folder structure, we might want to take all of the pieces out so they all sit at top level. We can do that with the promote demote option. Okay, so if I select on a component or a run, okay, you can choose whether you want to select the priority of the selection priority, sorry, of the component or the part. So again, I can choose whether I want to keep, delete, or promote that component. We've also got the options to copy runs and then change the style. Okay, so if you're wanting to copy a run and then change the style to a different size, you can do that within here as well. And then, as we mentioned, we've got some of the automated export options. So if I wanted to create a drawing, I could choose to create a drawing with particular options within here of this run. Okay, and I can choose the template for the assembly, the template for the parts, and the scaling option within here. And that's going to take it out to a core setup that may include things like your cutting list or your bill of materials on that particular drawing template, so that again, you don't have to spend extra time configuring and looking at this. It will do it automatically for you. Okay. So let's jump back into the presentation then and have a little bit of a look around kind of the configuration side. So obviously one of the key specifications for the tool was a nice easy way of getting up and running. So within the settings environment within here, okay, and that sits in the Sovelia Routing ribbon, okay, along the right hand side, we've got the settings option. We're just going to have a look at some of the kind of the configurations that we can set up within here. So when you download and install the product, you're aware of what you might need to change when you actually get started with it. Okay, so we're going to jump into these in a little bit more detail, but you can, within the settings, you can set things like your save locations, and you can also set things like your naming schemes as well. And you can also define that from an admin perspective. So let's have a look at how some of these work then. So we can have a look and we can set save locations based on a number of components. So obviously when we're creating that route that we've just had a look at, we're going to be creating lots of individual components, so lots of pipes, lots of bends and end fittings and connections from there. So what we can do is we can set that based on a general project location. So your Inventor project, you could have a spools folder, okay? And spools is the naming term for Sovelia Routing for your kind of top level run or top level routes, okay? And they can be saved in unique subfolders, or you can have it so that you've just got a general folder in your project location, like in a library folder, for example. But what you might want to do is set it so that it's saved per customer or per design. Okay, so what we can do, if we have a look at this video, we can drop it down and set it so that it's set to the active assembly. So I could have within here a customer folder, okay, and then all of the routing files are going to be saved in a routing folder within that location. And again, you don't have to set any of that up. That's done from this option. I can then choose a default template. So if we've got any properties that we want to map through, and also whether I want to ground the component as well. So we can choose whether by default the components will be grounded. We've also got the option in here to define whether the assembly pipe assembly is going to be phantom. Okay, so that's the BOM structure of that component. So we might actually want to set it to phantom so that we're not actually including in the bill of materials all of the pipe information and all of the bend information. We just want to show that it will be included still in the mass calculations and things like that to pull through to our top level. Okay, we just want to show the overall pipe assembly and then show that on a different drawing. We've also got the options for naming scheme, and I mentioned we wouldn't touch too much on Vault in this scenario, but just one thing that we can actually do within here is set up our Vault naming schemes to link, our naming schemes in Sovelia Routing to link to our naming schemes within Vault. So if we have a look, when we create our new option, if I just pause it there, we can choose whether we want to create our names through Vault or a local to Sovelia Routing. So if I press play, I'm going to choose the first option as Vault, and it's going to pick up or reference some of my numbering schemes within here. Okay, I can then choose for which file type I want, so for the individual bits of pipe, and then I can set up so that it will be my default option. So what I've set up in Vault is that it will say the word pipe, and then it will have a dash and then a code for depending on what type it is, and then a sequential number. Okay, so nice easy ways of kind of defining or keeping unique file names for individual lengths of pipe within there. We've also got the option to do that locally, and I think this is quite a powerful tool in terms of setting it up locally, because it's very similar to how the Vault function works. So again, if we're setting this up locally, we can choose the type that we want to save the file as. Okay, I'm going to choose a demo, and I'm just going to pause it here for a second when I drop this down. We can set up a number of different fields to enable or to set our kind of routing components to save into. So we can set it up so that it will sit there with maybe a piece of fixed text, or maybe it's going to use the parent name from the top level assembly, or it's going to use a sequential number. So, okay, so what I'm going to do in this example is I'm going to choose to have a fixed text with the word pipe, because I'm going to set this up for pipe, and then a dash. Okay, and it's going to be a very basic one, but it's just going to then use a 3-digit sequential number. So every time a new piece of pipe is created, it'll be pipe dash and then the next sequential number. Okay, and then choose OK on that one, and then I can hit OK and choose to have that when I'm saving the files. So you've got a couple of options there in terms of how you want to name or number your particular components. Now we've also got the option, if I just pause that there before we start, to set up from an admin point of view. Okay, so if we're setting this up globally, which is what we would recommend, you can set up particular areas within the settings to kind of point and only be kind of read-only for particular users. And it's quite a handy tool. So if I choose play on this one, you can add in the admin tab at the top. Okay, so what we're going to do for this is I'm going to go to the general tab, and you can see now under this admin section, we've got these read-only boxes per setting or per group of settings. So what I want to do is for every time a new route is created, I want the center line to be shown in the part. Okay, I don't want the users to be able to have any kind of turn this feature off. I want that to be set for everyone so that it gives that kind of consistency throughout the company. So I'm going to change that to read only from an admin point of view and choose to create this in the part file. So if I now go back, you can see that this is grayed out, and this is what the users or the kind of the day-to-day users will see, is that they can actually see the settings, but they can't make any amendments to that particular group of settings. And what's great about it is that you can set it for that particular groups. So you could have it so that your your naming schemes and your file save locations are set to read only, but things like your coloring schemes, which you may want on a more individual basis, can be set up per user. Okay. So just a quick point on that admin toolbar. That admin toolbar is actually installed or comes with a checkbox on the installation. So if you're a CAD admin, you would choose to install the admin package, and then you'd be able to configure this. And then we'll talk about how you can set that up globally a little bit later on once we've gone through the spec editor. So let's actually have a look at the spec editor then. And I think the spec editor is a massive part of the product, and it's a very user-friendly dialog box, and I wanted to make sure I covered this in today's session, just so that if you do go away and you're wanting to look at the product, you have a bit of an understanding of how it works and kind of what the kind of the features that it brings to Sovelia Routing as a whole. So the spec editor is a kind of the configuration area for all of your standards, and that standard is based off of a database. Okay, and these databases store all of your properties, so things like your pipe settings and properties, your fixtures and fittings, so tees, bends, reducers and everything like that. It will also store all of your bending information and things like your also your insulation sizes, so thickness sizes and things like weld gaps. Okay, so it's a little bit like the styles and standards in the core Inventor functionality, but for Sovelia Routing. So again, let's have a little look at how this works. And the first thing I'm just going to show you is how you can set up a database and how you can set up individual specs for each of your users. So in terms of setting up a database then, obviously most people will only have kind of one or two databases depending on whether you're going to be using the one that we've configured or whether you want to set up your own custom one. Okay, if you've got individual breakouts in different parts of the company, you might want to set that up as well within there, so people can choose which database that they want to utilize. So to create a database, you're just going to hit the little plus button when you go into the spec editor, and I'm just obviously going to create one with for Symetri, our company, okay, and choose OK within there. Now at this point, we've now got no specs, okay, so if I just play that, you'll see from the drop down, okay, if I just drop it back a second, we've got no specs within there, okay, because we created a new database or a new setup from this point. So at this point, this is where you might break it down to individual customers, as I was mentioning earlier, or you might have it set though for individual purchasing or standards that you use. So you might use ANSI for one, and you might use ISO for another. Okay, you can set up all of your different specs from within here, and these appear in that drop-down list as you're working. So again, nice and easy to create a spec. You're just putting in the name of the spec, okay, and then we'll go through and we'll have a look at how we can configure our spec within here. So if I select on, for example, I've only got the one. If I select on any of these features, you can see that there's going to be nothing sitting within there at the minute. So let's have a look at how we can add in some of our values. So we'll obviously have a little look at how we can add in our piping values within here. So what we can do is if I go to the pipe area, we've got a couple of options. We've got the option to add in a manual pipe, okay, or we've got that option to add it in from the content center. And again, the spec editor, it can rely heavily off the content center, but it doesn't have to. It depends on whether you've got the files locally or whether you're wanting to make the files locally, or whether the files actually already exist within the content center already. For the first part of this, I'm just going to show you how you can add in a manual pipe. So we're going to choose manual, okay, and it's going to bring up some options within here. So what you can do is start to fill out things like your display name. Okay, we'll touch on the two nominal diameter and schedule properties, so ND and SN in a little bit. You can see there we had a drop down list for our material. Okay, so we can pick from our Inventor materials. We can put the outer diameter, the thickness, the max length, as well as any custom properties that we want to include within here. Okay, so if I just skip through, okay, I'm just going to add in another one within here. What we've got is an easy way of setting up our pipes. Okay, so an easy way of setting up, well, this is going to be an 8mm pipe, this is going to be stainless steel, and it's going to have an outer diameter of this and a thickness of another point. Okay, so it's nice and easy to set up the values within here. So the other option that we have is to add the pipes or any of the fixtures and fittings from the content center. Okay, we can also add it from our local drive. So it doesn't have to be manually added. If we've already got the fixture or fitting in our local area, we can add that in as well. So that's what we're going to have a look at now. And we're going to add in a couple of elbows, one from our local Windows Explorer and one from the content center. So if I go to elbow, what we can do is choose to add in a file within here. Okay, I'm going to go into this particular file. Okay, and if I just pause it here, you can see it's going to pick up on that particular file and map through the properties that I've configured or the parameters that I've configured in that particular file. Okay, so things like radius, we've got the angle in there, okay, and they can just be mapped from a drop-down list within there. Okay, and if I then choose to save this option, okay, you can see in here I've already added quite a few because we're back in the standard one now. If I scroll to the bottom, we've added this option in here. So once we have a look at how we can sync that 90-degree elbow through, you'll see that that drop down when I was creating a new straight and then adding a bend, we'd be able to see if we've set it up with the sync, which we'll go through in a second, you'd have that file to be able to link through and select on in that drop down list. Okay. So the other option that we have is to add it from the content center. Now the content center will look exactly the same as how it does normally. And instead of adding in members from the content center, we're actually going to be adding in families from the content center. And it will always add all of the members within there. So I'm going to select on this ISO component within here. Okay, and again, I'll just pause it when we get to this particular point. We're going to be adding, I think it's 11 rows within here because that particular family that we've selected on this ISO elbow 4144 has got 11 variations of size within there. So what I can do is I can then map through the particular properties that I want from the content center. Okay, I can also choose at the bottom here if I want to allow for a custom angle. Okay, and you can modify that by a parameter. Okay, so if you've got any self-draining routes, you can add them in there. And then I can choose to calculate this. And what I like about this is it gives you the kind of the visual of it's copying from or generating all of these files from the content center to your spec editor. And it gives you a little bit of a time on how long that takes. And I've left this in real time, so it gives you a bit of an understanding of kind of the speed of how quick it is to add all of these files in here. Okay, so if you're adding in maybe 100 files within here, it might take a little bit longer, but it would give you maybe, it would say it would take 3 or 4 minutes to add in all 100 files within there. Okay, and you can see then it's added them files in, so I now have that option or that family of files to be able to access now from that drop-down list. And one thing we need to do before we move forward is to match the ND and the SM properties, the nominal diameter and the schedule. And what this is going to do, we're going to be matching the properties from the pipe to the elbow to the T to the reducer and to any connections that we have available. And what that will do, so for this example here, okay, I'm just going to pause this straight away. We've got a row in here which is showing us that the ND and SN are currently blank at the minute. So if I was placing this elbow in, okay, I would have no pipes available. It's not linked to any pipes at the minute, but it's linked to 59 variations of T and 61 variations of reducer and 35 connections. Okay, so on that drop-down list, we're going to have to be kind of sit there for a while and configuring, and sometimes they might not work together, they may not fit together. So we want to actually link them up so that this 90-degree elbow will map through to when we create that particular size of pipe. So this is just a 1-inch pipe that we've created here. And you can see if I jump into the pipe section, that 1-inch pipe that's created, or the 2-inch pipe that we use in the demo, has mapped properties for the nominal diameter and the schedule within here. Okay, and you'll see on this right hand side, it's going to show that actually that piece of pipe here has one T junction. So if I was creating the pipe and then wanting to add in a T, okay, it would only give me the list, or that drop down would only give me the list of one available T. Okay, so what we can do, we've got no elbows at the minute. I'm going to jump into the elbow section, and I'm going to actually map through those particular properties by hitting this little pencil icon within here. So you can see from the drop down, and again, this is pulled from the content center, we've got the ND and SN properties already mapped through. So if I save them, okay, you'll see straight away it's updated, and we've now got one available pipe from that option. So that pipe now, when you're creating it, is going to link through to that elbow. Okay, and the same for all of the other sizes within here. So you won't have a list of about 50 or 60 variations within there. Okay, so it's a nice and easy way of mapping the properties through. You can also input the properties manually if you know that you want to add them in and you want them to match particular values between a pipe to an elbow to a T to a particular end fitting connection. So kind of moving away then from the fixtures and fittings side of things, we can also set up our own bending machines within the environment as well. So in this kind of bending machines area, you can see we've already got one set up by default, but you can import the diameters for your bending machines, and then that's going to pull through and you can input values for your bend radius and your clamping length within there. So again, it's kind of filling out properties that you would, and it will kind of flag up and suggest that maybe it doesn't fit the clamping length or something like that for that particular file. But if you've got a number of different bending machines in here, you would then have just a quite easy click export. Okay, you'd have to set up the configuration for the bending machine output, but you can set up as many machines as you want in there. In that initial drop down, there's an option to choose which bending machine or which type that you want to create, whether it's going to be pipe or tube. We've also got the option for different features, so things like our insulation, which we've already spoken about. We can also add in collar types as well and weld gaps. So let's have a look at how we can add them in. So again, a quick way of adding them in is manually. Okay, so you can type in a particular value manually. So I'm going to put in the diameter and then the particular height for the collar, and then give it a display name within here. Okay, that's going to be the diameter of the pipe. If, for example, in this instance, and we can do this within the collar as well, and within our bending machines, we have a blank setup. What we want to do is import the pipe diameter, and it's going to reference back to our original pipe sizes that we've created, so that it's going to pull through and add in all of the pipe sizes and variations from within there. Okay, so if I choose to import from the pipe diameter, okay, you can see it's going to check all of these boxes on. Okay, I can turn off individual sizes if I want to, and then I can go through and just add in the thickness of that insulation. Okay, so I'll skip through the video so you don't have to watch me clicking and putting them values in, and then you can choose the material for that particular piece of information. Okay, or that particular pipe size insulation. And then finally, or the final thing that we'll touch in the spec editor is the weld gaps. So if you're wanting to add in a new weld gap size, okay, you can do that. And again, this is going to be a manual input. You can choose to add in a particular size depending on the diameter from the pipe diameters. Okay, and that'll be used in the current spec because I've checked that box on. So one thing I've mentioned quite a few times today is about how you can configure this globally. So again, with everything from the Sovelia side, it's looking to drive kind of compliance throughout the business and consistency throughout the business. So things like your spec editor and all of your settings, you may want to be set on a global level. So in the settings, one thing we didn't touch on was this synchronization area. Now, everything that you're creating in your database and your settings is going to be pulled through from, is pointed locally in your file explorer. So that's at this location at the bottom here. Okay, and you'll see it sits under these 5 folders. So if I choose synchronization within here and pop in or copy these folders once they've been configured and pop them to a shared location, I can then browse to that location and sync all of the databases, the settings, the layout, and any drawing templates and anything that's been configured so that everyone is working or off of the same kind of, or singing off the same hymn sheet. So you're all working in the same line, essentially. Okay. So I know we're kind of very quickly running out of time, but I just wanted to point out some of the other functions. Obviously, this has been a bit of an introduction to the Sovelia Routing product, but there is kind of a lot more functionality within there. So things like, obviously we've touched on tube and pipe routes today. We haven't even looked at kind of the hosing or the cable environment that we've got within there as well. We can also add things like sensor tubes and pipe supports automatically within there, as long as they've been published to a library. And again, one thing that we haven't touched too much detail on is the automated drawing export. So some of that automation function that kind of links through from the Sovelia range. So just to kind of recap then some of the benefits that you'll see from working within the kind of the Sovelia routing environment. And one of the key things is, again, looking at kind of the whole Sovelia range of products, the standardization and trying to kind of drive that compliance and that configuration so that everyone's working in the same way and everyone's exporting in the same way, and allowing kind of engineers and designers to actually do the work rather than kind of repetitive tasks day in, day out. We also looked at kind of the productivity. Okay, so just the kind of simpler, easy workflow of using Sovelia routing in comparison to maybe using the tube and pipe environment. And one thing to kind of finally touch on there is that the company unique requirements. Obviously, every customer is going to, or every company that you work for or that you're at, is going to work in a very slightly different way. Okay, there won't be too many companies that work exactly the same way. So there's going to be other pain points and issues that you're going to experience. And because this product is developed in-house, you have the option to come and speak to us about kind of where them pain points are and where them issues are in terms of kind of them requirements. And we can look at maybe developing tools for the product or developing tools for individually for you. And I think that links nicely onto kind of some of the links that I've just popped up on screen. Now you can take a screenshot of this, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these hopefully sent out with a kind of a copy of the recording of the webinar, so that you've got access to things like our ideas station for Sovelia routing. So again, like kind of some of the core Autodesk products, you'll see that it's got an ideas station. So if there is anything that when you're using the product day in, day out, you think actually this feature might benefit not only me, but it might benefit a lot of people, if you pop it on the ideas station, it can get votes, and then that'll be flagged up to our development team. Okay, and they'll be able to have a look at that. We've also got a new help page for Sovelia routing. So again, if you're looking to if you're struggling with a particular point of the product, we obviously have our support team, but we've also got a help page, so you can just go through and have a look at kind of some useful links. Now, I've mentioned obviously about the product downloads area. You will need a license initially to get that up and running. But if you do want to come and speak to us about it, obviously feel free to come to myself. I'll pop my email on the last slide so that you can either contact myself or contact your account manager within Symetri. Okay, and I also pop some product details up there. Okay, so that is at the Sovelia.com website. So I've obviously mentioned a few times today about the Sovelia range. Obviously today we've touched on Sovelia routing, but there's a total of 8 products within here that kind of fill the gaps that within the Autodesk collection and kind of the other kind of a general engineering process that we found that we need to create or define products within. So you can see we're not only looking at kind of the core Inventor products, we do have a couple in here with Sovelia Routing and the Sovelia Toolkit for Inventor. We also look at Sovelia AutoCAD. Okay, so there's tools for automation for AutoCAD. We've also got a few other visualization tools, so Visualizer and then the Configurator. Okay, a couple of tools from the data management side. So we've got Sovelia PLM and Sovelia Vault. Again, more automation tools to help you kind of drive compliance throughout the business. So I'd recommend having just a quick browse at Sovelia.com, have a look at kind of some of the other tools and products that we offer. At Sovelia.com, you'll see all of the kind of a bit of an overview of each of the products, and there'll be some short videos and kind of some key points within there. But again, if you've got any questions, feel free to come to myself or feel free to speak to your account manager about any of them. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview of the product. I know I've rushed through quite a bit there. There's quite a lot of information to take in, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an understanding of kind of how the product works and where it might fit in within your current workflows or your current setup. So again, I put my email at the bottom there. I just want to check to see if we've got any questions within here. So I'm just going to expand down the questions box or the chat window. Okay, it doesn't look like we've got any questions at the minute. Again, if you do have a question, feel free to unmute yourself as well. So apologies, let me. Is there any drawing automation included? Yes, so there is a drawing automation included in the output option. Okay, so you, if I just quickly jump back in, we've got the create drawing with options. Okay, so you're going to be basing it off of a template. Okay, I haven't got any templates set up in this setup. Unfortunately, this is just for the demo, but you can set up automated drawing templates so that your views will all be set up, your cutting list will be on there, and you have that extra feature, or that you have them templates set up so that it will just pull through, and you're just going to then create a drawing, and it will create the drawing for that route or run that you've created. Okay. Mark, it says you can't mute. Let me see if I can unmute you.
Hi, Jason.
Hi, Mark.
I just have a couple of questions. Some of my colleagues have used the tube pipe in the past, and to be honest, we full training course on it maybe about 8 years ago, and because the complication is set up, we never really developed any further. But obviously, what you've shown is a lot more intuitive. I was wondering, one of the issues we found with tube and pipe was third-party models. It didn't interact well with them, so a lot of what we do could be streamlines, and we're using models from Spirit Circle. In terms of your seeing you've got an insert any feature there, would that be intelligent enough to pick up the connection types as you insert models, or is that, you know, if we put a Spirit Circle model in, would the spools be split up to accommodate that properly, or how does it work with third-party models?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The insert any function is more for inserting any fitting or fixture. So that's not about inserting kind of other models. But again, because what's different about the tube and pipe environment is you need to kind of publish the component and link it out from that particular component. And that's probably where you were seeing some of the issues when you're importing third-party models, because with the tube and pipe environment, again, it's designed to be kind of quite user friendly. It's picking up on the circular reference, so you wouldn't need to kind of have any kind of configuration with your third-party models. You just import them using the kind of the Inventor any CAD functionality, and then you just pick up on that particular reference geometry that's within there.
We were, for example, we've got a job on right now, and unfortunately we started this before we became aware of this package, or else we probably would have downloaded a demo of it to try and see how it would help that particular job. For that, so my colleague has configured a manifold of steam fittings just now, all with, I think they're all threaded connections on them. So what you're saying is you position all your valves and fittings, and then you run your pipe using this to it and use a threaded. It can use a threaded end connection. Then I didn't see that as an option there, but I take it can be.
Yes, yeah, you can add threaded connections. I've just for the purpose of the demo just done one without a threaded, but yeah, you can set that up within there.
Right. My other question, you kind of alluded to this when you're setting up your templates, but I'm wondering if there's a easier way. Is it a lot of our pipe work for nuclear sites would incorporate would be like self-draining pipe work, like you say, it would have a fall of like 1/100 or something in it. If you were, is there a way of putting it in as you model in, and would it automatically cut elbows back, or would we need to set up a library of elbows that have the right angle already in them?
So there is the option when you publish it to the spec editor. So if I just jump into the elbow function here, let me see if I can edit this. No, that's not going to pull it through. So if I was adding in a file from the content center, it might just take a little bit too long for the purpose of this demo. But yeah, there's the option in. Sorry, it might have had a crash. No, we're okay. There's the option to add in that particular value within there. So
right.
if it will kind of create a custom angle for you. There are some custom elbows within the content center that you can add, but you can set it up so that the self-draining routes, it doesn't have kind of a self-draining option like the tube and pipe environment does, but again, this one probably doesn't have that example, but I can find an example for you and show you how.
When we looked at the tube, or when we got our initial training in the tube and pipe software, it didn't actually have that function. It didn't cut elbows back, so we were finding that it was, well, perhaps it was our styles weren't set up properly, but we found it was quite a nightmare to model in falls, and a lot of our jobs involve that. And we use point clouds and meshes to kind of drive our designs. So we want to show an accurate route, and rather than just 90 degrees and straight, we want to show exactly how it interacts with plant. And sometimes a fall over a long length it makes a big difference to the class detection. So we would use that quite a lot. But I wondered if, when you're inserting your pipe, can you insert an angle or anything on the pipe when it's being inserted, or is it just run on straight? You can, right?
Yeah, so I don't have any set up, unfortunately, but when you insert that pipe, you have the option. If I just edit this and edit the route for this one. Okay, if I'm adding that bend, okay, let me just take it out to that particular point. Okay, I've got the option in here to add in a custom angle at this point here.
So we wouldn't need to set up a style, you could just do it at that angle. We knew the angle of 1/100.
Yeah, you'd need to have the list from the drop down. At what point you need to have a kind of a custom elbow in here, because if I put that in, it's only a 90-degree elbow. Okay, it would just fail at that point.
If you put in the 90 there, it would. So if you change that to 87, would that not cut the elbow back down at all?
Not on this particular file, but I'd have to have a custom angle on this drop down. But you would just have that in.
Yeah. Right, but you only need to add the one custom angle part, and it would then take your information every time. You don't have, say we use one system to follow 1/100, one system to follow 1/50. You'd have a custom angle drop down, and then you'd set your angle in your window there. Then is that what you're saying?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay. Right, so that seems a lot easier to set up for a start. So it would be easy to get one custom angle elbow in our drop down menu then, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think they both of the tools do have that kind of self-draining option, or the self-draining tool available. They just work in slightly different ways.
Yeah. That's really easy. It's a one-off setup, and then once you've got a custom elbow, then you can model in any fall for any system then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, once you've got that set up in the spec, then you're just choosing that particular angle.
Yeah, well, that was my two main questions, because everything else you've kind of demonstrated it just shows how quickly and easy it is for us to, model in routes. Like I say, we're finding more and more that we're using mesh as a background model rather than what you've got there. So I imagine the same way you picked a plane, can you be able to pick a work point in your mesh to route through or route to?
Yes, yeah, you'd be able to pick up a point within there, and if not, you'd be able to generate a plane off of that if it doesn't just take on that particular point.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the only two questions I had really, Jason. That looks like a very good package actually. Far more intuitive than the tube and pipe was.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and I think that's kind of a key point, is it's a lot more intuitive and a lot more user friendly than kind of some of the other softwares that are available, including the tube and pipe environment.
Yeah,
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mark. Is there any other questions at all before we finish up? Doesn't look like we've got any in the questions window. I can't see anyone else with their hand up, but okay, we'll leave it. We'll end the recording there then. As I say, we'll get some information out to you regarding some of the recording of the webinar and some of the useful links. And again, if you do want to drop me an email, I'll leave my email up on screen here. Feel free to take a screenshot and drop me an email and ask me any other questions that you may think of after that. But thank you for listening today, guys. Hopefully you found it useful, and hopefully I'll hear from you all soon.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.